Breaking news: has Macron been affected by the conflict in Ukraine? Informed allies would be grateful. President Macron of France is not widely known for apologizing. So, people paid attention when he gave a somewhat contrite speech about Russia and Ukraine. Since Russia's invasion, Macron has been the target of criticism and skepticism for his insistence on continuing to talk down Russian President Vladimir Putin. After more than a year, he was praising NATO, the alliance he had once said was experiencing brain death, and telling a crowd in Slovakia that Western Europe had failed to listen to the East on Russia. Afterwards, when France provided unexpectedly robust support for Ukraine's bid to join the military alliance, some began to wonder whether or not the war had altered Macron's views. The Allies still have questions. This week, European leaders will gather in Spain to discuss how to bring Ukraine and other countries closer in the months and years ahead, and the question of where Macron and France stand on Ukraine will loom large over the discussions. France aspires to take a leadership role in discussions about EU expansion. It advocates vehemently for Ukraine to join NATO. And it promises to be by Ukraine's side until victory. These positions are unexpected given France's history of ambivalence toward NATO and opposition to expanding the European Union. Analysts have compared Germany's dramatic shift in defense spending after the invasion to a U-turn or a French Zeitenwende. As the war drags on, many allies remain confused as to why it took so long for Macron to come around, and whether he will follow through with actions as well as words. A senior European official has said that the EU cannot be convinced until France increases its commitment over the long term. The official said, "Money always speaks to commitment quite well, but only under the condition of anonymity because the topic of discussion involves delicate ally dynamics." According to Rym Momtaz, a consultant and research fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies based in Paris, there's a question of whether there's been a change in tactic, not strategy. She elaborated, saying, "Tactics can open margins of maneuver. Nobody knows yet how he'll put this to use, but that's the big question." Driving a larger Europe forward. Macron has always wanted to be Europe's leader, but he blew it with Ukraine, leaving it to Poland and the Baltic states to toughen up the Western alliance. He angered his allies by maintaining contact with Vladimir Putin in the days leading up to the invasion and during the early stages of the war. After that, he let American officials and even Boris Johnson of Britain take the reins on matters of arms and funding. French officials counter that their country's initial response was robust. They point out that France was among the first countries to respond to the invasion by sending troops to Romania. However, it is widely agreed that the president's messages have been all over the place. Few would argue that the war hasn't altered his outlook. According to Marie Dumoulin, director of the European Council on Foreign Relations' Wider Europe program, before February 2022, Macron was hesitant to expand the European Union in part out of fear of provoking Russia. It seems that is no longer the case. Macron, along with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, and others, visited Ukraine in June 2022. They visited alleged sites of Russian atrocities and vowed to back Ukraine's EU bid after the trip. Macron has spent the past few months trying to establish France as an EU expansion leader. Recently, French and German officials presented a report exploring how Europe could accommodate new members. According to Eurasia Group's managing director for Europe Mujtaba Rahman, Macron now wants France to be at the vanguard on expansion. Constrained by the perception that France was not a good ally, Rahman said of Macron's ability to lead in Europe after the invasion in February 2022. The French president understands that this will bring about a major shift in geopolitical power dynamics, from which France stands to benefit, and so he is acting accordingly. Building a safer world. When it comes to NATO, Macron has also changed his tune. In a speech he gave in Bratislava, Slovakia in May, he somewhat backtracked on his brain death comment, saying that Putin had jolted NATO back to life. Macron assured the crowd that he was never naive about Russia, but he acknowledged that Western Europe had ignored warnings from the East. He also recognized the importance of the United States' assistance in providing materials and intelligence to Ukraine. His advice: bolster Europe's defenses, something Macron has wanted for a while, and give Ukraine solid guarantees of safety. France surprised some allies by pledging strong support for Ukraine's membership bid at the NATO summit in July, and it also joined the pledge of the Group of 7 nations to provide longer-term security assurances. Macron also said that France would provide Ukraine with long-range Scalp missiles. In the eyes of the French government, this is not a U-turn, but rather an acceleration of a trend that has been building for some time. There's a deeper trend, which was decided for strategic reasons, which has been accelerated by the war, said one official, speaking anonymously to provide a frank assessment of French thought. The Trump administration would welcome a more hawkish stance on Ukraine. If France is a leader in driving Europe to spend more and do more, that is fully in line with what successive administrations have wanted to see, said Ian Lesser, vice president of the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Some allies have been reassured by the apparent French pivot. A lack of trust and lingering doubts about the seriousness of this dedication remain, however, and these concerns are likely to grow if the conflict continues to devolve into a protracted war of attrition. Expert on France and Poland at the European Council on Foreign Relations Paweł Zerka said that Macron's speech was well received in the Polish press, but that officials and experts in the country are still cautious. He might be posturing as the biggest friend of Ukraine, while letting others become the bad guys, he said, referring to Putin. Zerka claims that when he tries to explain the evolution of French thought to his Polish contacts, he is met with a wall of incredulity. They're doubtful because they wonder if France can really change its mind that quickly, he explained. Ready to take the concrete steps. In the coming weeks and months, allies will be keeping an eye on Macron's performance. According to French officials, negotiations with Ukraine to formalize the G7 security pledge are currently underway. That agreement will be a crucial indicator of whether France has overhauled its policy, as Momtaz of the International Institute for Strategic Studies put it. She pondered whether or not Macron had merely decided to show Russia that he had changed his mind about NATO. Until we have proof, concrete steps, she said, the jury needs to be out. German-language Macron biographer Joseph de Weck will be keeping tabs on whether or not these concerns remain a priority for the French leader. Macron's foreign policy has often been inconsistent in the past. He hates having to make decisions, but is always tempted by tactical opportunities, he said. The president has come to realize, at least provisionally, that this is the way history is going and that he should join the bandwagon and lead it.